Hey guys, welcome to another session of Epic 7. Today we're going to do a top 10 list, my top 10 list of heroes to reroll for. So since I made the top 10 reasons to play Epic 7, we've gotten a lot of newer players kind of going on board or converting from other games, telling me, hey Jaggy man, thanks for that video because I really love this game now. I'm in love with this game. It's so good. It's so beautiful. And one of the major questions people ask is like, well, who should I reroll for? I mean, we get that constantly on Discord all the time. And my guys do like a really good job of sharing their advice, and they're always they're correct. I mean, we're all kind of aligned in what we think here. And so I think it's about time that I created my top 10 list of heroes to reroll for. Now, obviously, when you are rerolling, especially at the selective summon, you have to understand that there's a limited pool of heroes. You can't get all of them. So for example, like you can't pull Fiend from the selective summon, you can't pull Haste from selective summon, you can't pull like a ton of heroes from the selective summon. I don't think any of the new heroes that are introduced, like Cecilia, you can get Karin, Kisei, etc. I don't think you can get them from the selective summon. It's limited to a pool, but you can pull Cecilia and other ones not in the selective summon from the regular summon. Like if you're re-rolling for it and you're spending like a couple Sky Stones here and there, you can get them from the regular summon, Covenant summon, but the selective one you're limited to a pool. So for my top 10 list, I've split it up into 4 5-stars that I think is really good to start out with, and then 6 4-stars. And the only reason why I'm listing it as 5 stars and 4 stars is because we all know that they're more rare, and the rarer they are, obviously the more you want them. And all the 3 stars, like 3-star healers, 3-star knights, 3-star warriors, and etc., they all can be filler, and you can pull them like while you're doing your selective summon, chasing after the 5-star or the 4-star on this top 10 list, or even on your own top 10 list. Maybe you want to do another one. So for me, let's get started. I'm gonna do the 4 5-stars first, and my number 1 contender is Vildred. Now, the only reason why I would say Vildred is now like probably one of the most sought after 5-stars because he's got a developer's buff. If you follow the Epic 7 news over the time, you know that Smilegate is really good at updating their heroes. Heroes that may seem to be junk at first. Ken used to be pretty bad, Vildred used to be bad, Spectre Tenebria and ML Summon used to be bad. They all got buffs and now they're all like really good. They all become like top tier and everybody now wants them. So even though that you can use this list as a base to start the game off, you don't have to like stick to like a certain list. This is a problem currently on YouTube. There are a lot of old YouTube videos that say that pull for Cez, pull for Destina, and they're all stuck in this older thinking because those videos were made pre-developers buff. Vildred now is way better than Cez, no matter how you cut it, because he's just a better farmer. We're going to quickly take a look into their kits of these heroes that I'm saying here. But I want to say that Vildred 1, if you take a look at his base stats, we're always going to look at the 6-star awakened stats here. Pretty good attack, but he has very low damage mods. All his damage mods are quite low. The only thing that's going for him is because of his passive and because of what he brings to the table. As in, he's a cleaver. What cleaver means is that he's an AoE damage dealer, and pretty much that's all he strives on, which is a really good thing for early game farming, for some hunts that needs to take on multiple enemies at the same time, and very good for PvP and even GVG. So S3 here, I believe it's only a 1-time mod after you soul burn, or 1.1, very very low, but it does AoE damage. Okay, AoE damage, and it deals damage proportional to his speed. Now, most of the time, Vildreds aren't built with really high speed, and the reason is because he has his own passive that can push his own combat readiness. Pushing his own combat readiness means that he doesn't really need to rely on speed to get a turn, but rather you can really funnel all his stats into attack, critical hit chance, and critical hit damage. And that's basically what you really need to focus on. You need a team that's built around Vildred to pump up his speed, either a speed buff, or pump up his combat readiness, a CR boost. So his S2 is a passive, increases attack for 2 turns, and attacks all enemies one more time if an enemy is defeated by sweep or blade ascent. So that's the S1 or the S3. Increase combat readiness by 20% every time an enemy is defeated. That doesn't matter if he kills or if someone else on your team kills. He just gets a 20% combat readiness boost. 20% means that it's, well, 20% is obvious. It's one fifth of your time gauge on the left side to know your turn count. So if you defeat, let's say 3 enemies, he gets a 60% boost, and that usually cuts in front of any other person that goes. So that's really good. And of course, know that because if he does an AoE on his S3, you might be able to take down 1, 2, 3, or even maybe 4 enemies. So that's a big combat readiness boost. Plus he buffs his own attack, right? So he buffs his own attack when the enemy is defeated. Now, sweep is also really good. It's a single target skill. Okay, even though it says it attacks 2 enemies, it's a single target skill, meaning if you run it on auto, if you run it on manual, you have to click, or he chooses an enemy and then a second random enemy gets hit. Okay, generally it will go for, if you're autoing it, it will go for elemental advantage first and foremost, and it tries to leave elemental weakness, of course, as the lowest priority. The other thing is if you proc a dual attack, so if another teammate of yours attacks and he goes, he can proc sweep, which also does 2 attacks, right? It attacks 2 enemies. So if you kill a person even after he is procced to dual attack, if you kill someone with his sweep, he'll still do Dancing Blade, which is an AoE attack. That's the amazing part of Vildred. So if you have watched a couple of my videos, I might have, if you have watched a review video I did for Dark Guardy's account, you take a look at his cleave team that we set up for him, and you'll be able to see that Vildred just does like an insane amount of attacks, and that's what Vildred is really known for. He's really, really good that way. Of course, if you were building him, I think some substats and speed would be nice, just because the damage dealt is proportional to his speed, but the speed scaling is very, very low, that you should not focus on it whatsoever. He should be using some attack boot, attacking ring, critical hit chance necklace, or critical hit damage necklace if you can make up the substats. But anyways, that's my thoughts for Vildred there. My second on the list is Ken. So I was saying, man, these 2 guys, being really bad before, are now incredibly strong. Recently, I'm gonna make be making a kind of a couple videos, especially in GVG fights, where I start featuring Ken. You'll start seeing how good he is. My Ken right now is just very low attack, and all of his skills are scaled on his max health. He has one of the highest base health in the game. I think the second highest, 7,323. I think that's about 1,000 more health more than Crow himself, which is incredibly strong. It means it doesn't take too many health percentage stats to get him to a really, really high amount. The highest I've seen in Arena, which was still a really effective Ken, was 26,000 HP. 26,000 HP, and he still dealt a lot of damage, which means the rest of his stats are still really good. But the scaling on his skills are actually really high. That's the really impressive part. They're all the really high damage mods already, and then plus it scales really high on health. The S3 scales up to a 30% of his max health into his damage formula, so it's incredibly strong. As you can see here, there's a lot of stuff, too long didn't read, but there's a lot of stuff going on here. For the S3, it does take a bit of a fighting spirit, so that's his gauge, fighting spirit to be able to use it, but it has a 6-turn cooldown after. Once you use his S3, he gets vigor, granted vigor, and once you have vigor, everything else, his S1 and S2 gets additional benefits, but we're gonna get to that in a bit. So he does stun for 1 turn and a decreased attack for 2 turns, and then he grants vigor, and then that for 4 turns. Now you can see their vigor's description increases the attack and defense. Now it doesn't say the percentage here, but it increases the attack and defense by 30%. Right, keep that in mind, 30% buff. All right, so that's not entirely like an attack buff or a defense buff, but for vigor have a combo of attack and defense buff for 30%, and it's stackable. That's incredibly crazy. So imagine him on a team with an attack buffer, with a defense buffer like Crow. Then he becomes very, 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 very crazy. I don't think it's additive in terms of, it's not like a 50% buff with a 30%. I don't think he gets 80%. I think it's multiplicative. So whatever that turns out to be. Let's see, damage dealt proportional to caster max health. Yeah, and then caster begins his first battle with 50 fighting spirit, which means he gets it's halfway. He needs 100 fighting spirit to be able to get this. And he gains 5 fighting spirit when attacked. So whenever someone attacks him, he gains 5 fighting spirit. Okay, so in S2 here, attacks enemy with a kick, increasing his speed. So it's really good, and 75% chance to decrease the defense. Gains 40 fighting spirit when an enemy is defeated if you kill him. And then the caster is granted vigor. If the caster is granted vigor, so if you have proc to S3 and you go back to the S2, ignores the effect resistance. So you're going to get the 75% defense break, no matter what. So you see how amazing that is? It's amazing. And then damage dealt proportional to the caster's max health. I believe it's a 10% scaling of the max health, which is still really strong. Of course, every single bit counts. And the thing is, you want to use his S1 and S2 mainly as a defense break, but they still do incredible damage. That's the amazing part. Now you notice that it's a 3-turn cooldown, so generally after you have used, let's say you go to S2 and then you go to S1, you're pretty much going to fill up Phoenix Flurry already. You get Vigor and you go back to the S2 with an increased speed. Of course, he has increased speed throughout this build-up. You get Vigor on it. And he gets the benefit of that ignored effect resist. Crazy stuff. S1 is also really good. Two skills that with the defense break. It's a 35% chance. Of course, it's a bit lower. But if you have a vigor, it burns the target for 2 turns. Burning is based on the caster's max attack. That's post buff though. So if you have vigor and his attack is buffed from the vigor, and you have attack buffs stacked, his burn is going to do quite a bit of damage. So generally speaking, you want him to be at about like 2,000, 2,500 attack, but focus like skyrocketing his HP. Of course, you do want to build him with effectiveness because he is mainly solely a defense breaker. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. And pretty decent speed. You want him to be able to get his turns, to be able to proc, or to be able to actually use his S3. And yeah, so that's my thoughts on him. So really, what you would use him for, if you were re-rolling for him, he would be pretty much in the front lines. He would be your tank. Now, there's a couple ways to build him. You can build him with lifesteal set for sustainability, because if a lifesteal set, you have high HP and he does pretty decent damage, you can sustain pretty well. You can go with a counter set too, because every time he counters, he acquires 15 fighting spirit, because he will counter with knockout. So going with a counter set is quite interesting as well, especially if you're doing PvE. All right. So you, obviously with a counter set, you're gonna lose a bit of your possible health and defense stats if you're gonna go with a health and defense sets. But having a counter is really good. You can run Sigurd's Scythe with this, just a 5-star warrior artifact. Sigurd's Scythe on him, and then he wouldn't need the lifesteal set. Sigurd's Scythe with counter set is going to be amazing too, just because if his HP is lower than 50%, that's how Sigurd's Scythe works. He gets increased attack, and then his damage dealt is going to be absorbed back as health, a certain percentage. So he's a single target nuker. He's going to be a tank. He's going to be your defense breaker. So putting him up at the front lines is really good to start out with, and that really sets up your team. Very easy to build, Ken. Like I said, very easy, just because it's HP. The next one is Aramintha. So Aramintha also has a very good kit. She is a mage though. If we're going to preview the stats here, 6-star awakening. As you can see, the health is at 4,500. She'll be a backliner. She'll be your damage dealer, cleaver, so AoE damage. And she just does a lot of damage over time as well. Very good to start out with if you're going for a really solid farmer. She's also really good for PvP and GVG scenarios if you have a proper team with her. So she's not a really bad investment whatsoever. The health of course is low, but you're going to see that suffering on all mages of all types. Mages are generally pretty overpowered in terms of their kits. If not, their damage mods are pretty high, which Aramintha's is pretty high, or their attack is really high. So she's really good to start out with. You can see the S3 here. Attacks all enemies with massive fire, 80% chance to burn for 2 turns, increase the combat readiness by 50%. So self-sustainable, she can be built pretty fast. I would say like 150 speed would be minimal, but you want to stack the attack because burning is damage over time based on max attack. So max attack, she has like, her attack base stats are not super high. For a mage is not bad though, but it's not super high, otherwise she'd be too OP. But again, you need a high effectiveness on her stats to be able to get it. Of course, she gets it up to 100%. You can see here, up to 100% proc chance if you get it to a +5 skill enhance. So it's 100% burn. If you are investing or you have Aramintha, I would suggest in getting it up to at least 100% burn. Basically, her whole kit is to be set up for burning, right? S2 Catalyst. So Sprinkle is a catalyst and increasing attack for all allies for 2 turns. Another reason why she's good on your team comp is that she's an off attack buffer. 2-turn attack buff is very standard for an attack buffer, so she's really good at that. If the enemy is burned, so after you've done the S3, it'll do additional damage to the enemies, only the burned enemies, and then making them unhealable for 2 turns. So that's really good to have. Very good for golem hunts, even all the way up to golem 11, which is end game material. Very good to have. Oh, actually, I should have mentioned that Ken is as well, and Vildred is end game for Banshee. So all really good heroes to invest in here. And then Ignite. So attacks an enemy with explosion of flames, 35% chance to burn for 2 turns, and decreases cooldown of Fire Pillar by 1 turn. You get an additional 5% chance, as you can see there. 15%. So up to a 50% chance to burn. That's very high. Definitely invest it up all the effect chance as you can here, and then reduce the cooldown of Pillar. So the Fire Pillar by 1 turn. So there's a couple artifacts that she can use that she could really benefit from. I think there's one that reduces the cooldown, has a chance to reduce cooldown. Very good if you want to use for farming. I think it's like Achates Scepter. I think that's the one. Oh yeah, thanks. Batzilla says A11. So man, so the hunt A11 also really good for Vildred. Also really good. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on Aramintha. I mean, she's a very potent damage dealer AOE wise. I know that like one of my friends, Kyle or Rare Ruby, he used Aramintha like from the get go. He just like, he didn't even reroll. He just pulled it. He's like, hey, I like the look of her. I'm gonna keep her. And it turns out she's pretty good. And like I only say that her drawback is the squishiness, but the squishiness also applies to Vildred, which I didn't give him that, but he does deserve it. He's a thief, so lower HP. The very last one on the 5-star list here is Charlotte that I want to talk about. So Charlotte, I think she was above here. Here. Charlotte might be a confusing one for a lot of people, like why you selected her, and the reason is because she has a very high innate damage mods. So her damage mods are really high. She is a knight, as you can see here, which means she has access to knight artifacts. Knight artifacts could be really good if you're starting off in the game. Like she can use Aureus, she can use Elbrus Ritual Sword, which are really decent knight artifacts, especially for PvE content. Now for herself, she doesn't have like the highest health for a knight, but you know, I've seen her easily build for high HP as well. Attack is not that high, but it's very high for a knight actually. But that's 6-star Awakened. She has an innate 23% critical hit chance. That's because of her awakenings, which is good for a knight, which means that if you're building her for a damage dealer, which most likely you would, a bruiser, so high HP, high damage, she would really benefit from that extra critical hit chance. She would love you for that. You would love her for that, rather. You can take a look here. 4-turn cooldown, very quick. Soul Burning it. This is something to note. Soul Burning it will reduce the cooldown by 2 turns. Very easy to get. Now, her kind of thing is a bit like Ken. It takes a bit of time for her to ramp up in damage. But when you do ramp up in damage, she becomes a powerhouse for sure. You take a look at this. This is cut all enemies while spinning, so it's the AoE damage. Damage dealt dramatically increases proportional number of stacked focus. So she has a focus gauge on her, and she requires the other skills to be able to acquire focus. So acquires focus 1 with the S1, requires 2 focus with the S2. That's really good. Take a look at this. We're gonna get back to the S3 in a bit. S2, so 3-turn cooldown, and it has you could get it up to another 10% effect chance, so 35% effect chance AoE. Okay, AoE 35% chance to stun for 1 turn. Combat readiness increased by 30% each time an enemy is stunned. So each time an enemy is stunned. That means every single enemy that is stunned, she increases the combat readiness. Now, if you are new to the game, obviously, you know, I might be saying like so much technical stuff that you might not understand. Just take my word for it. Combat readiness is almost everything in this game. Almost more than speed. Almost more than speed. Okay, so combat readiness by 30% each time an enemy is stunned. And then this one is also really interesting. This kit, both the defense break and attack buff, but has a requirement. So increase the attack for cast for 2 turns and enemy health is above 50%, which is good for her. Like I said, she's supposed to be built for damage. And then it decreases the defense of an enemy if it's below 50% for 2 turns. Both of them for 2 turns. 2-turn defense break, 2-turn attack buff. Very good to use, especially in PvE. If you're fighting bosses, you might not be able to benefit from the defense break as much because it would take you a long time, and you would need, for her, you would really need an outside buffer and an outside defense breaker. For high HP monsters, you can see that you're going to be missing some stuff depending on the threshold of HP you're at. But regardless, it's good to have, especially in PvP. Because in PvP, what can happen is, because most generally, you know, heroes are more squishy, so you can choose who you want to defense break, or if you want an attack buff on yourself for a specific turn. So it's very, very interesting when you get into her full kit. So now, like I said, once she has acquired max focus, her damage mods become incredibly strong. Now, I think I actually pulled up her data here, which I actually want to say it's really high if she gets a maximum. Let me just pull it up. Yeah, so maximum focus gauge, I'm going to read this out. It's a 2.4 times damage modifier. 2.4 times damage modifier at a max focus gauge. And what that means is that's higher than a soul burned Luna. Alright, so Luna is a limited hero. Her S3 is known to be a very strong nuke, and this becomes stronger. Keep in mind that this is an AoE attack. That's what makes it super, super strong. Now, there is like some YouTube videos floating out there, people using Charlotte to take on hell raids. It's amazing to watch, and this is why she makes it on my top 10 list. Again, people really kind of like neglected her. I don't think, off the top of my head, I don't know, the stream guys can probably correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think she got a developer buff. It was just because people just didn't use her. And that's the one thing that, you know, it takes a lot to like study the game and study the heroes before you know if they're good or not. Just don't focus on like, you know, what every YouTuber is saying out there. You know, some people might say, oh, Charlotte sucks, or there's no talk on Charlotte, and then people just assume she sucks. But I remember correctly, I don't think she has a developer buff, but she's really good, as you can see in the kit right there. Not bad to start out with. TK loves Charlotte. You don't think she gets a buff? She doesn't got a buff, right? Yeah, I don't think so. I don't recall it. Alright, in the next ones, you know, this is a pretty long talk, obviously. But again, if you are re-rolling, keep in mind these 5-star heroes. Now, I'm going to talk about some 4-stars, 6 4-star heroes that are on my list. I've split it into 3 healers and 3 damage dealers, which I think would be good for, you know, beginners, mid-tier, and kind of fall off end game. And what I mean by end game is like boss fights, and even PvP, like high tier PvP and high ranking GVG. But there's no getting out of it. I don't see any of these 4-star heroes in this list that is high tier in terms of damage dealer. Now, every single one of these 4-star heroes are incredibly good, right? So don't let my top 10 think that, oh, okay, if I pull like, you know, like a Rin, she's completely terrible. If I pull Dominio, she's bad. It's not the case at all. Again, I have a limited slots, so that's why I'm gonna pick and choose these people. Now, if you are new, you have most likely heard Angelica is a must pull, alright? There's no in particular order here, but if you go with my top 10 5-star list, most of them are damage dealers. So you really want to couple that. Best case scenario is to couple that with a top tier healer. If you get a mix of those 4 5-star heroes, again, that's my opinion. 4 of those 5-star heroes mixed with one of these 3 4-star healers, go with it. Ship. It's done. It's done. But most of you guys have probably heard of Angelica. I'm not gonna dive too deep into the kits. It's just to know that she can reduce 1 turn cooldown here, but a soul burn extends the buff for 2 turns. If you have enough souls, you can keep up her S3 fully, which is the amazing part about her. Now, of course, there is other stuff that's amazing about her. For PvE content, you really want to benefit from that cooldown and that soul burn effect, pumping up that buff duration for 2 more turns. But for like PvP and regular just PvE content, really good healer, but immunity is amazing to have in this game. Immunity is amazing to have, especially in PvE, because you can't really get dispelled. Select bosses here and there, but most of the time you can't. It also brings a barrier to your whole team, which is extra survivability. That's on top of a heal, of course. Okay, so Aline wants me to make this note here. He says, tell people how many uses these 4 stars have, like hunts. Okay, all right, that makes sense. So for newer players, you know, you might be thinking, hey, only the 5 stars are really good. So yeah, so Angelica, you see her in hunts. So I've seen her used in let's see here. I think she can work. She can work for A11. She can work for Wyvern 11. She can work for Banshee 11, which is all end game stuff. She's pretty much the go-to healer for all Abyss content and even all raid content. All right, that's how good she is. She's seen in multiple high top level GVG teams and top level PvP defense teams as well, and used for offense healer as well. I use her as well in my offense PvP and GVG sometimes if she fits in. Very, very good to have. Very good. That's why she's so good. Right? That's why she's so good. Recovers an ally, yeah, so with the least health, a healing power. So if an ally has, like, let's say your team has like very, very low health, what would happen for her S2 is that she wouldn't split her healing. She would focus all the heal power onto 1, which is an additional healing. Now, there's a lot of artifacts that can work with healers. I'm not going to get into it, but just to say that's really good. The only thing I would say that her S1 is kind of lacking, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, she's a healer most off. And you get it up to 25% chance to stun. I myself, if I'm investing in her, I wouldn't invest into that stun chance. 5%, not make or break. And most likely you would not really, roll the RNG, like hope I get the stun. 1 out of 4 chance or 1 out of 5 chance to stun is just really, really low, and plus you need high effectiveness to be able to pull that off, which most likely you wouldn't be building her for. You would most likely build her for high speed, high HP, high defense. HP has a bit of priority. There is a threshold, of course, but that's it's probably for another video. High speed, just because you want to get her turns up, right? If anything, you want her faster than your damage dealers, because you want to be able to keep the barrier and immunity up if you are doing PvE content. Yeah, other than that, build effect resistance. All healers pretty much need effect resistance. If they are debuffed in any way, shape, or form, most likely they're gonna lose a lot of their own effectiveness in terms of their actual role as a healer. Alright, next I'm going to talk about Achates here. Let's see here. Achates, is she up here? Sometimes, I see a splash of stuff and my eyes just skip. Rare Ruby's joking. He says, this game is unplayable without Angelica with a crying face. But that's not true. The thing is, like, I know a couple guys on Discord, Batsilla, Rare Ruby, they all beat up to, high level, 80, 85, 86 Abyss are you guys on? Without Angelica. They're still waiting for her, and they know how good she is, but they just don't have her. So you can't ask for everything, right? But they can beat it. So it's not like you have to have Angelica. That's why I'm also going to be talking about all these other healers. Rare Ruby says he's on 86. Yeah. Okay. So so a lot of people have been saying that, hey, pull for Destina. Pull for Destina. Achates is not exactly the same, but like mini Destina. Destina's main thing is that in her S2 she can do a 50% CR boost, I believe, and a massive heal, and she can heal on all her skills. And her S3 does a AoE cleanse or dispel for all debuffs. Now she can do it too, but she has a benefit over Destina because Destina needs to wait one more turn than she does. Actually, it might be 2 turns. This is 4 turn here. Destina is a 6 turn with a minus 5 turn cooldown. She is 4 turn with a minus 2, so she's actually better in terms of that that dispel, AoE dispel and AoE heal. Okay, so it's really good. The S2 is very, very good, especially for PvE. Actually, for PvP too, if you are gonna take advantage of the defense team's AI, because you can set invincible. So it gives invincibility for 1 turn, and it also does a single target heal to whoever you cast it upon. So let's say if you're in PvP or even PvE and there's some fatal attack coming, you know it's coming because you can turn count, then you can cast invincibility on that hero that's going to be taking the damage, and then they'll take no damage whatsoever. So it's really good. Of course, invincibility can be dispelled, so Falcon O'Cleary, Charles can dispel it, other dispel it, Harado of course, Basar. But it's still good to have, very good to have. And for PvE content, that makes her one of the best healers. Again, AoE heal, very low cooldown, 3 turn only, very good. And then you have this for 3 turns as well. So you can pretty much cycle it. You're gonna have 1 off turn where you're gonna use an S1 here, but that's not that bad. She has an innate, as you can see here. This is why I'm saying, like, compared to Angelica, her S1's a bit better in terms of you have a higher proc chance and it decreases attack for 2 turns, a 2-turn debuff. Decreasing attack is obviously really good, and most bosses you can decrease the attack, whereas Angelica, most bosses you can't stun. That's a very big difference. That is why I'm saying that Achates, or Achates rather, I say Achates. Achates is really good to have. You can see that she can get up to a 50% decrease attack. So that's very good, and it's for 2 turns, right? Keep that in mind. So Achates, I would say, other than that she doesn't have immunity, having the cleanse like pretty much at the tip of your finger whenever you need it is very good to have. That's why I would say she would be my second choice healer for sure. She can do all the content that Angelica can do. The only thing is most likely she would need a Wondrous Potion Vial to remove the debuffs rather than immunity. And the last healer I want to talk about is Lots. So my eyes are really bad. Lots. Wow. I know you guys already see him, but okay, there you go. It's like dyslexia for images. Is that a thing? Ruby says I don't pronounce it like either of those. Feels bad, man. Am I really off? Whatever. Soul Weaver Lots. So Lots is a, you know, it might surprise some people. He's a healer, mainly healer over time, which actually could be decent. It depends on, you know, how you run your team. But continuous healing for 3 turns, 4 turn cooldown. But if you soul burn it, it buffs the duration by 2 turns. The only bad side about the continuous healing is that it can be dispelled. So, and it also has to wait for your turn in order to get the continuous heal. Otherwise, so it's not instant. That's what I mean. So let's say someone is on the brink of death. You do this, hoping for a continuous heal, but then, like, let's say a PvE boss just wipes you out. But that's because you didn't get your turn yet, right? So that's the only downside about continuous heal. But for continuous heal, like long runs like labyrinths, raids, they're not bad to have whatsoever. And the good thing is that it also boosts the combat readiness by 10% in innate. But if you max enhance the skill here, 1, you reduce the cooldown and the buff duration is 2 turns, you get more continuous healing, but you also get an additional 10%, so 20% CR boost on an S3 AoE. Keep that in mind. So that's very, very good. S2 is amazing as well. It's 100% CR boost if you max enhance it. It has 80% innate, which is also really good, but 100% means, let's say again, you have a situation where you need to nuke a boss before he gets a turn, right? Let's say he heals on the next turn or something. Being able to use this, you use your DPS, and while he gets his turn, boost the CR boost to 100%. It means that whatever hero that just went cuts in front of the line and goes first again. So for something like, let's say, Sirmia. So Sirmia is a new hero that you can pull on the Covenant summons. Sirmia would really benefit from it. You can do an S3, pump up the CR max, pump her up again. She can use an S2 to self-buff, and then do an S3 again to reduce the cooldown. But again, if you're a new player, you might not know what I'm talking about here, but I'm just saying that it's very, very potent, very good. Very good for PvP and GVG as well, if you really understand the defense team you're going up against. And also, of course, it recovers the health, right? So recovers on allies proportional to allies' max health. So the higher HP that that hero has, the more it heals. Incredible stuff. Now, if he is coupled with something like Rod also heals based on that's an artifact, 5-star artifact. Also couples based on the HP, max HP of the hero. It's also really good. Let's see here. Odin says, if you're gonna get bust down, you gotta wait for a turn to heal. You did. I like his dual attack chance and combat readiness effect. Yes. Alright, so, wait. Yeah, so S1. So S1 has a 50% chance to decrease attack for 1 turn. So notice the difference between him and Achates. But he gets up to a 75% chance if you enhance it up to a +3. 75% chance to decrease attack on 1 turn. Again, really good to have. And again, the proc rate is high. So in terms of S1 usability, again, compared to Angelica, I would say that Lots and Achates does have a better S1. But again, all their kits do something different. So you would use them for different scenarios. So let me... Oh yeah. Okay, actually that's a really good point as well for PMA. PMA reminded me that Lots is also used for very high morale team. So morale is used when you're doing labyrinth runs and raids to be able to extend the duration of you staying within the run. Because if you have low morale, you'll eventually die. You'll eventually get one shot by anything. But because he has one of the highest morale in game. He's also really good to have because of that reason. Yeah, thanks PMA. That's actually really good to note. Alright, next we're going to talk about damage dealers. So I have 3 damage dealers up. I'm not going to talk about the support as much because again, I think these are only useful if you're going to be re-rolling, and you just pull the other stuff like the support stuff off banner later, or you get a 3-star to help. Clarissa is my #1 choice in terms of 4-star damage dealer. The reason is because she has an AoE, she's a cleaver, and she can become really strong. If you take a look at, let's say, the base stats here, 1252. It's very strong. I would say like mid-tier, so like the highest attacks we can get are like Sirmia, Tenebria, which is like a 1300 attack. 1252 is like really mid-range. It's like Vildred. It's like Vildred level. Not bad. The only thing is that she still suffers the same thing as Vildred does, which is a low damage mod. Low damage mod is okay because if you read the full kit, especially her passive, she does something similar to Vildred, as in has a follow-up attack that's an AoE as well. So S3 says attacks all enemies spinning, inflicting damage, bleeding for 2 turns. That's good to have. Bleed is damage over time, but also based on your attack, based on max attack. Caster is enraged, and damage dealt is increased if the caster is enraged. Damage dealt is increased, and additional bleeding effect can be stacked. Okay, so enrage comes with after you kill someone, anyone, with an S1 or an S3. So for 3 turns, you get rage, so enraged, and it grants an extra AoE attack on all enemies. Anytime someone else dies, or someone dies, whether by the S3 or the S1, she becomes enraged, and she does another AoE attack, which is incredibly strong. I've seen her used in like mid-tier. I don't know if she's used as much in high-tier PvP anymore. But she was used in a lot of mid-tier PvP cleave compositions, and she can be really scary to deal with. If you run into Clarissa in PvP, don't go after her right away because she might take you by surprise. The S1 is okay. I would say the S1 is not super good. Again, low damage mods throughout her whole entire kit. It has an up to a 50% defense break for 2 turns. The defense break, I mean, it's a sub thing. It's a nice to have, but it's not her main thing. Her main thing is to cleave, is to do AoE damage, right? The only difference with her is that obviously she doesn't have the CR boost. And you know, she doesn't have all the the little niches that Vildred has, but of course she does bring another aspect to the game. If you do proc a dual attack and she does an S1 and kill someone, she does do rage as well, so that way it works the same as Vildred, and then becomes enraged, and then her S3 becomes stronger. You can reduce the cooldown, as you can see here, but that makes it a 3-turn cooldown, which makes it very, very, very viable for a cleave comp. So again, her use is mainly to be used for some lower tier wyvern hunts. Mainly farming. I would say farming has her probably her biggest thing, and then GVG and PvP. That's basically it. Arena. So that's my thoughts on her. So Lauren, hey man, welcome, and Zephin, hey man, welcome man, and Echo. Okay, and then let's see here, and then Cidd, my pride and joy. So if you guys watch my videos, you know that I'm a constant Cidd user. Now, every single hero can be good if you got the gear and you get the investments in you know, skill enhanced. So as a reminder for every single person here that's watching this right now, it's not to say that all the other heroes are bad. That's not why I'm neglecting them. Again, this is a top 10 list. If we take a look at Cidd here, he has very low base attack. We just compared, I know it's a thief comparing to a warrior, Clarissa, but Clarissa as a warrior has 1200 attack. Cidd has only 1000 attack. A lot of other thieves like Sez, Kisei, they all have about 1200 attack. So Cidd has very, very low base attack. The only thing that makes up for Cidd is that his damage mods are really high. It's really good for him. His damage mods are really high, which means he really needs to take advantage not of attack percent gear. So put it this way, high base stat attack, you want to focus a lot on high percent attack gear because you can scale it higher. Now obviously everything else comes with it, critical hit damage of course comes with it, but if you have someone like Cidd and you have low base attack, you know, putting all your effort into let's say attack percentage, you're not going to get the benefit as much as you would with someone with higher base attack. So for Cidd, you really want to load him up with as much critical hit damage as possible. Now, if you know the damage formula, critical hit damage, of course, is one of the most important things because it's calculated right after, at the end of the formula. Because his damage mods are so high, having high critical hit damage means that he does a lot of damage, right? A lot of damage. If you guys watch a couple of my GVG videos, if I feature Cidd in it, you'll see that he slices down ML Kens pretty easily. If he has an attack buff, of course. Like 17,000 damage, and with a soul burn easily like 25,000 damage. That's on pretty much anyone with like a standard defense, like 800 defense. So one of the other things for him is that his kit, I just love his kit. The reason why I introduced him in here is not just he's really good for some boss fights, he's good for farming too, because he does get a lot of turns. He's pretty good for Banshee hunts as well, and even Golem hunts. I've used him for a couple Golem hunts, not Golem 11 yet though, but Golem 10 I used him, and he did just fine. So if you read here, so it does an extra turn and the enemy is defeated with hack, alright, so his S3, and attacks with an elemental advantage if he has increased speed. Alright, so if he has a speed buff on him, he will have elemental advantage, which means he won't miss fire heroes, and he will also have a 10% additional damage based on the elemental advantage. So that's very, very strong. It means that he will never miss on his S3 if he has a speed buff up. Now, for Cidd, generally you do need to run an outside speed buffer if you're going to use it on turn 1. But you know, if I'm running farm runs and I'm too lazy to run like a speed buffer on it because I'm leveling up fodder or whatnot, he is able to get his own speed high. But there is a drawback. You do need to get his critical rate really high. 100% if possible, but my current Cidd right now is at 98%. His passive here, Wind's Resolve. When a caster is granted increased speed, when a caster is granted increased speed, yeah, Relentless Strike is enhanced to deal more damage and decreases defense of enemy for 1 turn. So if you have a speed buff again, you'll be able to decrease the defense for 1 turn. Now, 1 turn defense break isn't that usable unless you have Dust Devil, so he could proc another turn, or even R and L, so he could proc another turn. He won't be able to benefit from it himself, but if you do have another damage dealer, it could benefit. So for farming run, let's say if he's your sole DPS, Wind Resolve really doesn't really help him. That defense break doesn't help him, depending on the artifact you're using. S1 is where it's at. If you get a critical hit, note that if you get a critical hit, you will increase the speed for 2 turns to himself. Every single critical hit from the S1 thereafter will be able to increase his speed for 2 turns, which means once he gets a speed buff, he gets in what we call enhanced Relentless Strike. So Relentless Strike enhanced because of the S2 passive, right? So it's enhanced to deal more damage. So as you can see, if you skill enhance Relentless Strike or Wind's Resolve, Relentless Strike gets stacked damage. You calculate that. What's that's 20, 30, 40% total raw damage on top of the damage modification increase if you increase this. This is why I ran into a Cidd before that was able to one-shot my Crow with an S1. Obviously with the enhanced Relentless Strike, that's 20,000 HP with his S1 with my Crow without a defense break. It's incredibly scary. Cidd can be built for a really, really strong nuke. The only other problem is that he is an Earth Elemental, of course having elemental disadvantages, but the S3 makes up for that disadvantage. Very, 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 very scary. Lawrence asks, so Cidd is greater than ML Cidd? In terms of all-round usability, I would say so. ML Cidd mostly focused on PvP and GVG and only certain scenarios. He's only to counter speed comps, or disrupt rather. So Cidd, for sure, obviously it's easier to pull a Cidd, I think, than ML Cidd, than Assassin Cidd, I think. But yeah, notice that. My Cidd currently has a +5 enhance on the Relentless Strike, and with Wind Resolve I have up to a +4, I believe, or +3. Because I'm seeing where the meta is right now in PvP, there's a lot more HP and defense, tanky teams. Cidd is a bit losing his place, and that's a sad thing. The other thing is that he has very, very low base HP, as you can see there, 5,000. So he's very, very squishy. Like an AoE cleave, anything, even Bologna or Tenebria, bam, he's gone. So, of course every hero has their downfall, but that's my thoughts on him. Very good to start out with because he's a very strong single target nuker. Anyways, if you want a reference for Cidd and his damage, I did make a Cidd and Luna build video. I show a build of him and kind of showcase his damage running World 4-9. So anyways, that's my thoughts on him. Very self-sustainable. And then the last one is Karin. So Karin is my last choice. Now Karin wasn't even gonna make it on my list, but at the end, considering she kind of has a similar style to Cidd in terms of she can get another turn. If you take a look at her base stats, as you can see, as a 6-star Awakened, she has even lower health than Cidd. She's incredibly squishy, but her attack is much higher. Almost at a 1200 attack, which means her attack scaling is really high. She has a 23% innate critical hit chance as well. Really makes her really good. I have to mention that I think Cidd has the same. I believe Cidd has the same. Actually, let me double check. You guys probably saw it, but I just wanted to make that note there. Yeah, 23. Yep, same. Very good to have because both of these heroes require critical hit chance. So I'm gonna do the S3 first, and we're gonna go to the S2, and I might have to go back to the S3 in a bit. So for her damage mods are actually quite high. Her damage mod for her S3, it says increased damage dealt on a critical hit. This scaling is quite high. This is one of the reasons why you do want to get her critical hit damage high. The only thing is that she has a ton of investments that needed, as you can see, up to a +7, and she really needs to be invested to really see the love. Single single target nuker, kind of like Cidd in that way, but I prefer Cidd overall for farming. For herself, I mean, she can still work. She'll probably do a bit more damage than Cidd, single target farming, but Cidd to me has a better rotation in terms of farming or taking down multiple heroes. Whereas her, the S2 is really where you want to get a critical hit. Not only the S3, but the S2, because you'll be able to decrease the defense for 1 turn, and then grants an extra turn to the caster. It also, 1 turn to the caster, and then I think there's the S1 here. Yeah, okay, I'll talk about that later. Grants 1 turn to the caster, so she can benefit from her own defense break. That's the one side I would say that's a bit better than Cidd, because she won't even need an artifact to proc in order to benefit from her 1 turn defense break. So imagine your rotation. If you're running auto, the only thing bad about her auto is that she'll go S3 first and then S2. So it's a bit of a waste, but if you're manually using her, let's say for a boss fight or whatnot, this is really good, because if you critical hit, you'll get a decreased defense. That means it's a 100% defense break, and then it rolls on your effectiveness versus the bosses or PvP, the other heroes' effect resistance. But it grants her an extra turn, and once you go an extra turn, you can soul burn this S3, which increases the damage dealt. And if you have a high critical hit, you'll be able to scale off the critical hit damage, which does an insane amount. I will say that I was using Karin early on in my Wyvern 11 team. I was using her and Kisei before Luna was released. But now with Luna kind of in the picture, I've kind of retired her, sadly. That was all I was using her for. She was kept at 5-star, not even 6-star enhanced. No Malagoras invested. She was able to do, I think, 13,000 critical hit damage with a defense break procced without being really strong. Keep that in mind. No Malagoras, and without being really strong. I think she had about a 2.4k attack or 2.5k attack with like a 200% critical hit damage. It was doing 17,000 damage, which is pretty good. That's without soul burn, by the way. So without soul burn, I think with the soul burn she was able to do about 22,000 damage with a defense break and a critical hit. The S1 strikes an enemy with a sword. Critical hit chance. A critical hit would decrease a cooldown for 1 turn. That means for both skills. And that's why it's really good to have something like RNL on her. So RNL procs a 2nd turn, whereas RNL on Cidd is not as useful. I've said this before, and I know that people on the YouTube comments were saying that, hey man, you're wrong about that. RNL is really crazy, man. I just did like 6 turns on my Cidd, and I just wiped the whole PvP team. RNL is very conditional because there's a proc chance, right? But for Cidd, if you proc a RNL and you time it wrong, he'll lose his speed buff, which means his hack, his S3, when you get it up again, might not have elemental advantage. So that, that narrows down the pool of people you can attack, and you have to regain the enhanced relentless strike by using the S1 if you time it wrong. Whereas Karin, there is absolutely nothing wrong with her using RNL, because if she gets an extra turn, she doesn't give any downside to it, but rather only benefits. And the thing is that she can proc RNL on every single turn. I think on an S3 she could proc RNL, S2 she can't because it's already an additional turn, and S1 she can proc RNL. So I've seen people link up to also 6 turns, 4 to 6 turns on Karin. I forgot how it works. There's a limit to it because you run out of skills to be able to use. You'll be able to do it really quick, and with RNL proccing over and over, you reduce the cooldown and you'll be able to defense break all over again. It's very crazy if you see RNL procced on her. So that's one of the reasons why I would say that she's also really good. Anyways, I think that's it for my top 10 list. So I mean, I may be missing some people, but again, I feel that these 10 heroes will really start you off well on your new account. Now keep in mind there are other heroes used for other roles. I'm gonna leave it up to you guys as the players, or maybe other content creators, to look at the roles of the other, like the 3 stars. Also keep in mind you do get free heroes in your connections here, so 1 second. You do get free heroes in your connections. All it takes is some grind. So Aether is actually a really good healer. You get it for free right away. Hazel is a good healer if you get a specialty change. Elson, pretty decent buffer, but I hate him. Don't ask me why. Single target damage dealer you can get for with Lorena. Speed buffer and single target damage dealer and AoE damage dealer rather with Silk, really good, and she's a 4-star, so that's really nice to have. And Yuna is a 5-star with speed buffs, attack buffs, and also really good AoE damage dealer. All she does is AoE all day, every day. Crozet is a really good 4-star Ice Knight, especially for Wyvern 11. I can only say that because I know Badzilla, one of my friends, uses him at a 5-star. I don't believe he even promoted to 6-star, tanking Wyvern 11 like a champ with the Sword of Azera. So there's a reason why I don't suggest people like go for like tanky knights to reroll, but rather go for that. So know your options, that you have a lot of free heroes there that can fill the roles. So whatever you reroll for, make sure you have a strong DPS and a healer, ideally. If you don't get a healer in your reroll, and let's say you pull Vildred, let's say you pull Ken, I would say roll with it. That's my own opinion, but take it with a grain of salt. That's my own opinion. The only reason is because you have other healers in the mix for free, and that can work. I would say highest focus is probably DPS more than anything, and healers can come as they come. But if you do roll a top tier 5-star with like one of those 4-star healers, I would say that's definitely enough. You get a really big head start. Anyways, I think that was a long one. It's an hour long. Hopefully this has been helpful, especially for some newer players. I know you guys have been asking me, but anyways, let me know in the comments down below if you're watching this on YouTube what you think your top 10 would be. If you're an experienced player, maybe you have other insights, leave the comments there because the new players can really benefit from it. I'll pin it in the comments if it is a really good list and you have a good reasoning for it. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this, and I'm going to end this here. So if you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server, follow me on Twitter, and subscribe to YouTube if you haven't. And yeah, I will see you guys next time.